Hey buds, today I'm coming at you with a Bone Spear Necro. Um, it's a pretty fun build and it has decent synergies. It's not anything to do with the current meta of the Blood Mist build, but we do use Blood Mist in this build still, and I'll tell you why later. So going over the Legendaries, we have damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier, absorbing up to 315 damage for 10 seconds. Basic skills grant 25% damage reduction for 6.5 seconds. Basic skills gain 26% attack speed. While you have a barrier active, there is a 21% chance to ignore incoming direct damage from distant enemies. Enemies afflicted by your Iron Maiden have a 20% chance to be stunned for 1 second when they deal direct damage. And this is the main one of the build you really need. Bone Spear's primary attack makes enemies hit beyond the first vulnerable for 4.6 seconds. Bone Shards from Bone Spear deal 205% damage to vulnerable enemies and pierce them. Skills deal 39% increased damage based on when your available primary resource when cast, receiving the maximum benefit while you have the full primary resource. Critical strikes with bone skills increase your essence regen by 20% for 4 seconds. Attacking enemies with a basic skill increases the damage of your next core skill cast by 8% up to 50%. So the way the build works is your basic attacks are granting damage reduction, and they're getting increased attack speed to keep your essence high, as well as pepper the target to stack up to 50% more damage for your core ability. Your core ability here is your Bone Spear, and Bone Spear is being buffed for damage plus the shards that come off of it. As well as when you have high essence, you're going to have higher damage, and because we've got a lot of crits with Bone Spear is going to also give you essence regen. So it's a nice circular loop. We also have enemies affected by Iron Maiden get a 20% chance to be stunned, and you're always going to be putting this down to get the Amplify Curse damage off of it, as well as getting essence regen back. The final part would be the defensives, which is why we have Barrier here off of Elites. And if you have Barrier active, you get a chance that you're going to ignore incoming damage from distant enemies. Overall, it makes a nice combo where you're able to build up for huge nuke spears. You have pretty good survivability, and you still get to use the golem. So skills-wise, we're going to be taking Bone Splinters. It helps make targets vulnerable, and it gets a chance to get extra additional projectiles, so it fans out pretty good. And with the attack speed buffs we have, it's very fast in terms of how fast it fires. So that's very good for us to get our SS gen and spread vulnerability. Bone Spear is our main dumper here, and we've got it breaking into shards when it's destroyed, as well as giving us more crit chance. So this procs with our vulnerability off of that, and it's going to stack. This is our main nuke. We're using Iron Maiden because it gives us our essence back, as well as amplify our damage further on the targets. And with the one legendary, it can also stun targets. We're taking Serration to get increased crit chance for all the essence that we have, because we're trying to keep our essence high. We're getting 10 times crit with bone skills. Your bone skills deal increased damage. So this is just a cycle of damage that we're going to get off the basics and the bone spears. And your bone spears deal increased critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. So they're critting, and we're going to have good vulnerability and everything. So that's going to come into play. Standalone is just a little bit of damage reduction, and it's just off our main one minion, and that's mainly just because we want to be getting a Memento Mori, which when we sacrifice Skeletal Warriors and Skeletal Mages, it increases the sacrifice bonus by 40%. One thing I will add, and I will say about this build, is that if you don't have a lot of plus skills to get you Bone Prison or to get you Blood Mist, they are things that you can likely not take in favor of still having more crit and more damage and higher sacrifice values. It's just something that makes the build that much stronger. Obviously, having the Bone Prison is really nice to kind of corral enemies. Having the Blood Mist is really nice to be protected and invulnerable if you needed it, but they're not necessary for the actual damage. So what we're doing here, obviously, we're sacrificing skirmishers to increase the critical chance that we get. And we're sacrificing cold mages, which is going to increase the damage that we get to vulnerable enemies. Overall, this comes together to make a really strong synergy and you get nice nuke bone spears. So typically when I'm coming into a room where I'm trying to control the fight and get things going, I will send my golem in to taunt to get all the attention, which pulls them to the center. I will put a prison down. I will amplify damage on the space, and then I'm teeing off with my auto attacks, my bone splinters. And we're doing this to build stacks. Once we have the 50 stacks, we amp damage again, and then send a nuke bone spear off. You always want to try and aim off of walls to get that rebound, because the splash damage from that is very good because of our two-handed weapon for which we put the legendary on. That's basically the main combo. If you get into trouble, that's why we take blood mills, because you become unbreakable and intangible, and you can get out of trouble whenever that occurs. Also gives you a bit of a barrier, so it's nice and strong for just being safe when you need it at a last resort.
I need time to do that. I need more time.